Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent. Aiden Crowley is alongside me. And if you had told a Bengals fan on October 7th that they'd be watching Joe Burrow have gotten injured and Jake Browning had been so bad that he needs to get benched and Joe Flacco was going to be your quarterback, they would have laughed and said, "What drugs did you take?" Well, here we are. It's October 7th, and the Bengals have a new quarterback in the building, and his name is Joe Flacco. And we're going to talk about it.
Flacco. Wacko for
We
Flacco.
are wacko for Flacco, I suppose. Bengals lose again. We're going to talk about that. They lose to the Lions 37 to 24. They continue their little tour of the NFC North next week, where they travel up to Lambeau Field to take on the 2-1-1 Packers, coming off of a bye. Um, yeah, that's we'll discuss that later, but it's certainly a difficult matchup. But let's start out with the news that I'm sure everybody has been talking about today in Cincinnati, and it's the fact that Joe Flacco is just a short trip across the state. No PJ needed, and probably good for the Bengals' finances as they are able to get Joe Flacco in the probably in the building before the end of the day tomorrow. You'd imagine. As Flacco comes in, the trade is very simple. Joe Flacco comes to Cincinnati along with a sixth round pick from Cleveland, and a fifth round pick goes the other way. So basically, just a small pick swap, probably, somewhere in the 50 to 100 spot range. It's a pretty solid price to pay, in my opinion. Like, again, and as long as they weren't giving up like picks in general, I was okay with a swap. So again, you move one of your fifth rounders moves down 50 picks, whatever. It's not like the Bengals use those picks well anyway, so who cares? Um, Again, Flacco comes in. Obviously, he hasn't looked great when he's played in Cleveland. But let's talk a little bit about the positives and the negatives here. We'll start with the positives. When I look back, Joe Flacco has obviously had a very long career, most of it in Baltimore, and now he's had a couple of stops here late on in his tenure. Cleveland once, now Cleveland again. He was in Indianapolis last year, played a little bit with, Anthony Richardson and his struggles. This might be the best set of weapons that Joe Flacco's ever had in his 20 plus year NFL career. Um, and he can throw the ball really far, and he is a good processor, and he, kind of can find his guys in stride, in my opinion. Um, and when he's been protected in clean pockets, he's actually ranked over the last 3 seasons of 45 accredited PFF quarterbacks. He's ranked 26th in terms of, I think, just a general grade with a clean pocket. So if, and this is a very large and significant if, they can keep Joe Flacco's jersey relatively clean, you're getting an upgrade, I think, at the quarterback position in terms of pure QB play. Also, Jake Browning can't throw the ball more than 40 yards, so there's that too. But Aiden, I'll let you kind of take over here and give your instant reaction. And you can, if you want to dive into the negatives, feel free. Go ahead. If you want to talk positives, reel me in. I have another positive that I'll get to in a second, but I'll let you bring it in first. So give me your
Yeah.
instant reaction.
I guess my initial reaction was this was just something that the Bengals had to do. This was something that was necessary. They could not keep going with the way they were going the last 3 weeks. It was unsustainable. It was horrific at times, and again, playing like a bottom 5, bottom 3 offense in the NFL, especially with the way that Jake Browning has played. So that's number one. So I think they recognize that after how the Lions game went and how Jake Browning looked against the Lions, that something needed to be done. Flacco, listen, you think about the options that were out there. I mean, there was Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston that people were pounding the table for. Apparently, through reporting, that was never an option. The Bengals never called the Giants, so that obviously wasn't there for them. Um, and then there were some people saying that they wanted Andy Dalton back, which would have been hilarious. But
You
you just
can't
look
even
around.
imagine that.
There's not a ton of moves that could have been made. This is one of the better ones they could have made. But if
I
you're
agree.
looking at it from the Bengals' perspective, you are 2-3 in a depleted AFC picture. And every year that Joe Burrow is your quarterback, you have to attack it and you have to get the most out of it. In the Bengals situation, they feel like the AFC North is still open, which I believe it is as well. And if Joe Flacco can play good enough football to keep you afloat, there's a chance that Burrow comes back at the end of the year and maybe you're fighting for something. That's what the Bengals are thinking and making a move like this. Now,
I I
no,
agree with you, and I think that this move in particular kind of signals to me that from the initial responses to, and look, we know nothing, right? Since we know that Joe Burrow had successful surgery, that's about it. What this tells me is that so far through the last week or so, yes, Jake Browning's been bad, but I think that the Bengals kind of know that Joe has a shot to play late in the year. I think that's what this tells me, right? I think that based on what the initial prognosis is. And again, we have no idea when we're even going to see Joe Burrow again at all, period. I haven't seen him. I don't think we've seen anybody seen him in public since everything went down a few weeks ago. But when you look at what the Bengals have, right? They've got, a Green Bay team this week that, yeah, they're really good. They're probably not going to win this game, whatever. But after that, they have a stretch where they play Pittsburgh, then they play the Jets, then they play the Bears. Those are three games. Look, Pittsburgh's good, but like not on the, I don't think any of those, I don't think any of those three teams are better than the Lions. Let's just put it that way,
the
right?
Lions are the best team in the
Like
league, in my opinion, right
Lions
now.
played really well, right? We're going to discuss that in a second. But I think what this does is the way that things were going with Browning were untenable. I think that's the word I would use, right?
They were horrific.
There was no future, right? There is no path for the Bengals to probably even get to 5 or 6 wins with the way that Jake Browning was playing. While Joe Flacco doesn't exactly snap your fingers and get you to a Super Bowl, what he does do is give you, while it's still a smaller chance than you would like, it gives you a chance. And that's like you just said, you can't throw a year of not just Joe, of all of these guys' prime away. Jamar Chase, who had himself a game on Sunday, right? T. Higgins, all these guys you spent all this money on, you got to give them a shot. And I think, like I said, with the weapons, if Joe Flacco can have a little bit of time in the pocket, I think he can have some success with
And
these weapons.
that's the thing for me, right? Like with all that being said, like the Bengals offensive line unit has been playing bottom three in the NFL. That might be generous. They've been horrific. They Orlando Brown Jr. has taken a massive step back. Mims has been somewhat of a disappointment this year. Ted Karras has fallen off of cliff. Dylan Fairchild has been okay, and then Jalen Rivers has been borderline unwatchable at times. He's the third string option. He should have never been in there in the first place. But when you have two guys go down, this is what happens. And then you step in what Flacco is 41 years old. He is extremely immobile, who has thrown 21 interceptions in his last 17 games of NFL play. A lot of that can be contributed to the offensive line play. We saw that earlier in the year with Cleveland and how they looked. So the question marks and I think the glaring red flags are everywhere. I mean, this is a guy who got benched for Dylan Gabriel, obviously, with the way that he was playing. So it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in you. However, you ask yourself, can it be worse? That I think that's the question that the Bengals are asking themselves. I think that's the question a lot of fans are asking. And at the bare minimum, if you want to give the Bengals some credit, it shows they at least care and at least want to fight for something this season. They could have easily just phoned it in and just let it ride. Just say, you know what, womp womp, Burrow got hurt. We'll see you next year. They're making somewhat of an
I
effort.
agree. They're giving it a shot, right? And the Bengals are in eighth place in the AFC right now. 7 teams make it
That
in.
that's
Isn't
the
that
thing,
wild?
right?
This
That's the
conference
thing.
is not good. It's
Yeah,
not good.
if Baltimore gets out and looks like their usual self, you know what I mean, and maybe they start the year. What are they now? They're 1-4.
One and four.
Maybe they start the year 3-2 and 4 or 4-1. Pittsburgh's having the start that they're having, and the AFC picture looks a little different. Maybe the Bengals don't make this move, but it's right in front of you. It really is.
And look, I'm gonna say this. I don't know how much. I don't even know how many, if any of these types of fans watch it. I don't think the Steelers are all that good. Personally,
I
I
don't
think they're
either.
okay. Rodgers has not played at a particularly high level. They've just beaten, the Jets beat themselves in week 1. right? Then they collapsed on themselves against Seattle in week two. And then the last couple weeks, they did well against the backup and against in Minnesota on the road in London against Minnesota, and now they had a bye, right? And they beat who'd they beat? Who's their other win? I can't remember. But like they're 3-1, but they haven't really played anybody at a particularly
Patriots.
high
The
level.
Patriots could have fumbled the ball for like five
The
times.
Patriots turned the ball over 5 times. You're not going to win a lot of football games that way. Spoiler alert. So, again, we'll see, right? The Patriots put in a good performance this past weekend, so who knows? But again, it kind of shows you again the parity in the AFC right now is at a very high level, right? With like I just said, the Bills beat or the Patriots beating the Bills. You saw last night the Jaguars take down the Chiefs. It really feels like anybody could come out of this conference right now. And that's why again you kind of have to make a move here because again the Bengals have only played one divisional game. They've only played three conference games. So like, it's still there in front of them. They have games, a lot of games against winnable teams over the next few weeks. It's just you gotta put it
And,
together.
and we knew before the season even started, this stretch of the schedule, even with Joe Burrow, was going to be, it was going to be tough. And it has proven to be that. And the Bengals have not helped themselves out at all. They've looked lifeless these past 3 weeks. And maybe it injects some belief into the team. It really sounds like we're coping here, and I think there is a lot of coping going around in Cincinnati right now because I think the vibes are as low as they've been in a long, 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 long time. Um, but again, it's like if you feel like you can get to 9-8, where's Pittsburgh at in that? You feel like Pittsburgh's around probably like a 9-10 win team. I feel like that gets it done in the North this year. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that Ravens defense, health wise, what Lamar looks like health wise. But I mean, the Ravens are still the betting favorites to win the AFC North. If that tells you anything about how
Yeah,
sports books feel about the
they got
Steelers.
pantsed by Houston.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we could just real quick do the divisional knockout now before we get to the Bengals, since we already talked about the Steelers. Baltimore's problems run a lot deeper than Lamar not playing. And yes,
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
that they're banged up, right? Marlon Humphrey didn't
They're the most
play.
injured team in the league by
Kyle
far.
Hamilton didn't play. Roquan Smith didn't play. I mean, those might be your three of your best defensive players. Not Madubuike didn't play. He's out for the year, right? They're down to second and third stringers almost everywhere on the defense. And then on the offense, right? Cooper Rush kind of thrown in there, right? He's not terrible, but he, played pretty terribly against a good Houston defense. And, all of a sudden the Texans are back to 2-3 and, Baltimore drops to 1-4. I won't count that team out because, if Lamar comes back and, um, I will say two things about Baltimore. Number one, Derrick Henry. Some tough questions might need to start being asked of Derrick Henry. And I know, like especially this week, they were keyed in, right? With Cooper Rush as a quarterback. But no, I don't think that Baltimore's scheme is setting up Derrick Henry the right way. And I just don't know if Derrick Henry has it the same way anymore. I think it's fair to wonder that over the last couple weeks. He was fantastic in week one against Buffalo. And since then, he's been a pedestrian. He's had fumble issues, the yards per carries in the threes, right? It's concerning for Baltimore. And then on the defensive side, like I said, with the injuries, there's only so much you can really do, right? But
They got
like,
CJ in the building. CJ Gardner
yeah,
Johnson, now Baltimore Raven.
I didn't see that, but there you
Yeah,
go.
they're trying.
It's something, right? I guess it's something. He'll fit right in on that roster. So, I think I don't know. I think that Baltimore's problems run a lot deeper than even just like yes, the injuries are bad. I will give them that. But even before the injuries, they gave up 40 something points to Buffalo in week one, right? They gave up a ton of points in week two. And this was before Madubuike or Smith or Hamilton got hurt. So, you know, there's only so much you could do defensively with that team. And then the Browns, I mean, at least they
Yeah,
tried. At
the
least they
Browns are
played all right. Thought Dylan Gabriel was fine, right? I don't think he did
yeah.
anything that was special per se, but I don't think he did anything that cost Cleveland the game necessarily. Didn't turn the ball over.
When is the
Um,
last time Cleveland has scored more than 21 points in a football game? I'm
that'd be
genuinely,
research.
I'm genuinely curious. It feels like it's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
I'll say this though. all of this conversation hinges on the Cincinnati Bengals team winning football games. And as currently structured, and from what you've seen through 5 weeks in the NFL season, Ethan, how confident are you in that happening?
Not particularly.
Because you
But
look
then
at that,
again, to show you, to illustrate the parity in the NFL this year, Jacksonville, great story, right? They've been, again, you got to give a ton of credit to Liam Cohen and what they've done there. Number one with that, look at how a new scheme can come in and change the vibes instantly, right? Maybe Cleveland or some of those other programs can maybe take a peek into that pamphlet because, right, Jacksonville was one of like literally pit bottom last year. And now all of a sudden they're the hot team, they're the hot topic in the NFL. And what's that loss to? Jake Browning, who threw 3 picks in that game. So, you know, it's this league makes no sense. I really think it's about as wide open an NFL season as we've seen in a long time. And, it's all there. So, yeah, go ahead, and then we'll get
I was
into
just
what we
going to say
saw
that
on Sunday.
just to answer my question from earlier, the last time that the Browns put up 21 or more points was on December 2nd of last year, week 13 against the Denver Broncos in a
Yes.
41 to 32 loss where Jameis Winston had 500 yards.
Winston went nuts in that game, and Jerry
Um,
Judy had like it was his
yeah.
revenge game. Jerry
Yep.
Judy had like
Yep.
240 yards, something like
Yep. But
that.
it's been a while. But yeah, you like I was saying earlier with this team, like just confidence wise, like you look at that game against Detroit and the final score is 37-24, and you're like, oh great, we only lost by, not that much. Maybe it wasn't too embarrassing. Yeah, that's because the Bengals scored 21 in the fourth quarter to make that game look a lot closer than what it was. I mean, it was 28-3 at the end of the third quarter. Detroit was doing whatever they wanted on offense. It was chunk after chunk. We were dropping Cam Sample into coverage. We were dropping Joseph Osai to try and guard Sam Laporta. Some of that was just mind-numbing to me. Jake Browning had probably his worst game yet, in my opinion, just in terms of his decision making. He threw 2 interceptions that were just head
I all
scratchers
three,
at best. At
all
best,
three were
head
terrible.
scratchers. I that pick to Kirby, he said post game, Kirby literally just said, yeah, he threw a horrible pass. Like he didn't even give himself credit
Wasn't
for the play
wrong.
he made. Um, I guess the bright spot is Jamar Chase is still the best football player. And pretty much anytime he steps on the field, 6 catches, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had an incredible catch for the first touchdown, and then
Hmm.
walked in backwards for the second one. He
Yeah,
said he wanted to
cooked
jump.
Amik Robinson,
Yeah, yeah.
Robertson on
Um,
that route.
if nothing else, Joe Flacco will get number one the ball. You know that.
That's the thing, right? You give just again like Joe Flacco might throw 15 picks over these next 14. How many games do they have left? Or 12 games,
He's thrown 21 in his
right?
last 17 games.
But if he throws 25 touchdowns, like you can maybe get behind it a little bit. So, that's all part of it. I got a couple thoughts on this game.
Mhm.
Number one, and I'm not sure how controversial-ish this is going to be. Was the defense good? No. Was the defense the reason they lost? No.
Correct.
That's my thing, right? I think look, some of the stunts and the drop coverages and whatnot, I think are dumb. I don't know why you're messing around with that. We saw it a couple times with Rumo, and you're like, what the hell is 91 doing in coverage, right? Because Trey Hendrickson had himself another very good game. And it's like, why am I seeing Cam Sample in coverage,
Why am I
right?
seeing Cam Sample in the game?
That's a great point, Aiden.
Keep
I
going.
wish I could
Sorry.
tell you the
Sorry.
answer, but I can't. I will say I think the defensive line did all right in this game. I thought they played pretty well. Miles Murphy got his first sack in how many years? So credit to him. Trey
Here's
Hendrickson
Trey's
played
take
pretty
dinner.
well. I thought Osai, when he was rushing the quarterback, I thought Osai played pretty well. Um, on the interior, I thought we did a decent job, right?
Well,
Uh,
that's the
you
start.
know, yeah, but again, and the biggest reason why we gave so many points is because the lines were set up in Bengals territory multiple times by just awful decisions, by the offense. They gave up 118 yards on the ground, which I honestly don't think is that bad. Only allowed 3.6 yards to carry. Um, they forced the fumble early in that game. Trey Hendrickson with a nice rush off the edge, forcing Jared Goff to kind of had the ball, knock away, classic strip sack. They held Brown. They held them to 2 of 8 on third down, which is pretty good. Um, but again, I think a lot of the mistakes on the defensive side are still just guys on the back end making mental mistakes.
I think the defense is exactly what you expected coming into the
Yeah.
coming into the season. You look at that roster, you look at the guys how they performed last year, and you thought to yourself it can't be worse, which it hasn't been worse. It's been about the same to slightly better at times, but there are still moments where guys aren't communicating. I go back to that Denver game where they didn't know how many people they had on the field half the time. Sometimes they had 12, sometimes they had 10, sometimes they didn't know where they were supposed to be. You have that going on. You also just have busted coverages. You have CTB getting benched for the third time, and it feels like 2 years.
Demetrius
Um,
Knight got benched, which I thought
yep.
was ridiculous.
So
I
it's
don't know
this
why you're
a
benching
lot
him.
of these issues with the defense are exactly what you thought coming in. In my opinion, I don't think they've played exceptionally better. I don't think they've played exceptionally worse than what a lot of people thought coming into the year.
I just don't like. I don't even know how to really quantify this. Like a lot of the issues defensively, I agree, are because a lot of these guys just don't maybe have that next level that maybe a lot of the Bengals might have hoped when they drafted. I go back to what we talked about last week. A lot of that falls on not even, we can blame Zach all we want. A lot of this falls on the front office for making the picks in the first place. But there's nothing you can do about that now, right? We have a season to
You're in this
play,
position.
and with the Flacco move today, you're trying to stay alive. So I think on the defensive side, again, I will say this: I think it's a better unit than last year. How much that tells you, it's like I was going to use an alliteration that really wasn't very nice. I'm going to make it a little bit nicer. It's like moving from 29th to about 23rd. Okay, right? 23rd ranked defense for the Bengals last year gets them in the postseason, right?
Yeah.
So, that is what it is. You've got a great player at edge rusher and Trey Hendrickson. You've got a couple other guys who have flashed. Dax Hill's played pretty well this year, right? A couple other dudes have been okay. I think Stone has been okay, but you know, it
I
is what
think
it is.
Mo Egger, Paul Danner Jr., and Jay Morrison talked about this on their podcast recently, and I found it pretty interesting. It was a conversation that branched off from the conversation that we had last week about the front office and their inability to target talent and identify talent well. And they asked, because some people were upset about paying Jamar and T. It's like, who else are you going to pay, right? And so they walked it down the line of on this defense, who do you feel like and you feel confident in having on the team next year? Who do you want on the team next year? And I'll pose that question to you, Ethan. On this Bengals defense, who would you pound the table for and say, let's get this guy in the building next year?
I mean, in terms of external or keeping guys in the building.
No, no, no. On this team, currently on the roster.
Oh, okay. I mean, obviously Trey, but we'll see what they decide to do on that department. I think Dax Hill has earned himself a
Mm-hmm.
spot. I think he's played pretty well. They obviously signed him to his fifth. They picked up his fifth-year
Yeah.
option, which comes into play next year, so they have him under contract for next season. Um, the
That's where
fact
the
that I
list
have to
ends for me.
Jordan Battle, maybe. He's been okay.
Yeah.
Again, I think I don't really blame the safeties for a lot of the issues this season. I think Stone and Battle have both been fine. Stone's at a contract after this year. They won't re-sign him. Battle obviously will still be here, barring anything crazy. Uh,
The,
Wilson has not looked his normal self.
yeah.
I'll say that much. For Logan Wilson, and linebackers have such a quick fuse, right? That it's one of the most physical positions in the National Football League. You're constantly just bang, bang, right? Every second you're hitting, and it's like, it takes a toll a lot quicker for that position. You've seen some of the best linebackers in the game, Luke Kuechly, right? Patrick Willis, retire very early in their careers just because of how much of a tiring position it is. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's going on with Logan Willis. I'm just saying I think he maybe is a half step slower, right?
It is.
Um,
Yeah, but for me, the list ends at Trey, if in a perfect world, Trey, and then Dax Hill, and then maybe Demetrius Knight if he improves over the course of the year, maybe. But it's
Knight's
like
been
those
whatever,
are
I
the
guess.
those are the guys that you're like, yes, I want around, like those, and that's where we're at. and that's where we're at. And guess what? Jordan Love's going to come into town. Matthew Golden, Josh Jacobs, all those guys going to roll into town. That's not
But
even mentioning.
we're rolling into their town, which is even better.
Right. That's what I meant. But like, we'll have to see. We'll have to.
I
I'll tell you right
I
now.
just
I'm starting Matthew Golden in fantasy this week.
I started the Lions defense this week.
Feeling pretty good about that.
So, I mean, my two big takeaways, I guess, from this game in general. Number one, and this has obviously already been taken care of, and it's that we needed, like, Browning couldn't start again.
Yep.
And obviously that's already been dealt with, and the Bengals shared that same sentiment that I did. Number two, I don't even know. Again, I don't really know how to quantify this because I've had a lot of weird feelings over the last couple of days about this game. Because like they fought a little bit in the fourth quarter, but the game was so far out of reach that like it didn't really matter. And then even when they got it to like it was 35 to 24, they got the ball back with like 4 minutes left. Yeah, it would have taken something crazy, but like they had a very small chance to win the game, instant safety. Like
Yeah.
the offensive line, Orlando Brown Jr.
Atrocious.
I'm about ready to have a very uncomfortable conversation about Orlando Brown Jr. Right with Amarius Mims, I thought he was a little bit better this week. Then obviously it was a really rough week for him in week number 4. I thought he was much better this week. Still not quite where I think the Bengals would want him to be, but it's a step in the right direction. Karras I thought was okay, I guess, and Orlando Brown Jr. is just a statue. Like the athleticism issues are what they are, right? You know, like this was a thing at Oklahoma. It's been an issue for the Ravens. It was an issue for the Chiefs, and now it's an issue here. You know that that's what's going to happen. The problem is you now have a guy who's just making mental mistakes on top of athleticism issues, and he can't bail. You can't like he doesn't have the athleticism to bail himself out of those mistakes. So I don't know what they do at left tackle. I mean,
That
if Orlando Brown
was
Jr.
gonna
played at a
be.
high level this year, he probably would have been a very interesting re-signing candidate. He's gone now. I don't know what you do. So I mean, it's going to be tough for them to kind of understand and see what they're kind of looking for. I don't know what they need to do. They have an issue at that left tackle spot that I don't know if they can truly fix right now. That's the biggest issue. Like they can't just go up and say. They don't have a guy in the building. Do you want to put Cody Ford out there? Right? Like,
Right, that's the thing. There is no alternative. Like it is just Orlando
and this
Brown
is like
Jr.
Orlando Brown Jr.'s had phenomenal success. He's won a Super Bowl, right? He's been a Pro Bowler. I'm not sure if he ever got an All Pro, but like he was very good in Kansas City. He was good in Baltimore too. And like, I just think it's a tough break. Again, you spend a lot of money on him, right? They put a lot of money into that, and
Is it though? Is it though, Ethan? How many times have we said that about the Cincinnati Bengals and
yeah,
offensive line
I think that's
talent
fair.
acquisition? You know what I mean? Is it a bad break? Andrew Whitworth said this on the Pat McAfee show
Hmm.
the other day when he was on, which you could obviously still tell he's butthurt that the Bengals let him go, which I would be too. I think he has a right to be upset, but you can tell there's some resentment there. But the last time that the Cincinnati Bengals have drafted and then re-signed an offensive lineman to a second contract, it has been 14 years. 2011 was the last time the Cincinnati Bengals drafted an offensive lineman and then signed him to a second contract. And they let guys like Andrew Whitworth and Zeitler walk out the building. Walk out the building. And it's like, at a certain point, it they just is what it is. They can't identify talent. They can't cultivate talent. They can't coach talent. It is what it is.
That's a nice list. I'm
Right there hasn't been a good
not
offensive
disagreeing with
line.
you.
Yeah, there just hasn't been a good offensive line unit with this team since
And then and the
2014.
worst part is, even when they bring in good offensive line talent, and it's been a while since they've done that, even when they've brought in good offensive line talent,
They
it
regress.
doesn't stick. See Andrew Whitworth, see Kevin Zeitler. Like it's you know, what can you do, right? It's all top down. It's
And
all top.
now this struggling unit gets to go try and block Rashad
Mr.
Gary,
Parsons.
Micah
Right.
Parsons, and
So,
all those
and
guys.
Green Bay's coming off a bye, right? They
Yep.
lose a weird football game. Well, they didn't lose, they tied. They tied a weird football game out in Dallas, 40 to 40. This was a defense actually that I thought had been one of the best in the league over the first couple weeks. And then just a lot of breakdowns against Dallas, right? George Pickens played very well. Again, this was a Dallas
Well,
unit that was
Dak is playing.
unseated.
Dak's playing at an
I
MVP
think
level.
I agree with you. Dak Prescott's playing at a very high level. George Pickens had a fantastic game. They ran the ball pretty well with Javonte Williams. It's this defense isn't quite as amazing as maybe it looked like back in week one against the Detroit team that was still kind of figuring out the offensive line, still kind of is figuring out the offensive line, and had some issues in that department. And Detroit has bounced back very well since that loss. So again, I think we'll see what Flacco looks like. It does, for all intents and purposes, it does look like the Bengals want Flacco to get right in there, right? They want him to play in that game. Um, and I think again, Joe Flacco's been in the league a whole lot of years, right? It's not going to take him a lot of time to learn a lot of the things that he needs to learn. In fact, most of the things that he needs to learn are just simple words, simple phrases, right? He knows everything else. He just has to do that. And the chemistry, the only way you're going to build any sort of chemistry with that guy over the next 12 to 14 weeks is to just connect, right? I would expect on the first drive of the game, try and hit Jamar Chase on a quick out. Just get him the ball, right? Get that feeling. Same with T. Higgins, right? Because T hasn't really been involved too much in the offense so far this season. Just get him the ball, right? We'll see how much this changes the run offense, right? Because the run game is still just non-existent. We didn't even talk about that because it's just given at this point. It's they haven't had any sort of luck running the ball, so why not just throw the ball 40 times a game, right? That's kind of where we're at right now. So I think there's just a lot going against the Bengals in this game in terms of the Packers coming off a bye at home, right? The Bengals have looked terrible the last few weeks. They're starting a new quarterback. I just don't see a
Vegas
world where
agrees
the
with you.
Bengals will say that again.
Vegas agrees with you. It's a 14 and a
Yeah.
half point spread.
Well, I just don't. Again, I don't see a world where the Bengals win this game. I don't. Maybe they keep it semi-competitive, and by semi, like 17 points. But like, I just don't. I don't see a world where, again, I've tried it because again, we try to stay as positive as we can, and flip everything, and you're like, oh, well, let's say the Packers turn the ball over 5 times, maybe, but like the chances of that happening are so minuscule that it probably what a Bengals win probably looks like is a Jordan Love just meltdown, which is kind of what I mean. You think about the formula that the Bengals have to follow is what happened in Cleveland a couple weeks ago. Right. Obviously, the Browns have a bit better of defense than the Bengals do, but the Browns just limited. They hung around in that game. It was 10-0 heading into the fourth quarter. The Browns offense had done nothing, zero, right? And then they go down, they get a decent drive out of Flacco, they kick a field goal, and then Jordan Love makes the mistake because they had hung around. They get the ball, they score on first, and they get it in the end zone, and then special teams wins them the game. So I think you have to follow some sort of formula like that. The defense is going to have to play out of its mind. Um, I just don't see a world where again, it needs to be a perfect storm, is what I'm saying. And I just don't see that happening. I think I'm going to go 31 to 16. 31 to 16. I'm going to say the Packers get the win.
All right. I am in the same boat, but I don't really have too much more to add to that. I was gonna go 38-17, so we're kind of close. But
Fair?
yeah, that's where I'm at. I think Josh Jacobs is gonna have a huge day.
Yeah.
I think that Matthew Golden in this receiving core is gonna have a big day. I mean, and I just I don't see Joe Flacco. It's so crazy to say that out loud. I don't see Joe Flacco in this Bengals
What
offense.
we don't even know what number he's going to
Yeah.
wear yet.
Is 17 open?
I was gonna say he could wear. I mean, he was wearing what 19 in
Nine.
Cleveland. I think. If well, he wore what he
No, he
wear.
was
He
wearing
wore
15. He was wearing 15 in Cleveland.
15 because he wore 5 in Baltimore. Obviously, that's taken, and 15's also taken. So we'll see what Joe Flacco
That,
what number he
but
wears.
I just don't. I don't see them moving the ball very well against this Packers defense.
Me neither.
I expect maybe some Jamar Chase garbage time.
Look, I said this last week. If the Bengals are looking for a new head coach this year, Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley would not be a guy I would be too unhappy with. I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. But let's get this
Yeah,
Minnesota,
you want to
Denver,
wrap it up? We
Detroit,
can
Green
wrap it
Bay
up.
stretch
Yeah,
over with, man. I'm
it's gonna
so
be a tough
tired.
one. It's gonna be a
Yep.
tough one, right? The Browns and Steelers actually play each other this week, and then the Ravens, another tough game for them. They're at home against the Rams. So
Their
again,
schedule is brutal.
if they want to go to 1-5, like it's a realistic thing. Like it's not a pipe dream, which is crazy to say that for Baltimore because they're just so. This is their worst start ever in franchise history.
Yeah,
Again,
tied
because it's
tied
not
for
been a very not a super old franchise. It's their worst start ever, which is unfathomable. So. Well, that'll wrap things up for this week. We'll be back on Monday. I know we actually the two of us were in Cincinnati. We didn't go to the game, but we were in Cincinnati with a Lions friend of ours. We subjected ourselves to that, and then we had to drink some of the sorrows away. So we did do that. But we'll be back on Monday of next week. We'll get things rolling once again, and we'll see if the Bengals and Joe Flacco look any sort of better on offense. Honestly, I would take that. If you lose the game, but Flacco looks at least semi-decent, I think I'd be like, okay, let's just attack the next couple games. So, because the last thing I say, you just need to give yourself a few wins to if Joe is back at any sort of semblance later in the year, you give yourself a shot in this AFC that is so wide open right now. You give yourself a shot. So,
tread water. Just tread water.
tread water. That's
We're
right.
drowning right now. We're drowning.
Yeah. Yeah, you could say that. So, all right. Well, that'll wrap things up for this edition of the Jungle Fever podcast. For Aiden Crowley, I've been Ethan Sargent. We're saying so long, and we'll be back next week. We'll recap what we saw out in Green Bay. Have a great day, everybody.